451. A woman stands in front of a mob fleeing Attila the Hun. Stop running. Get on your knees. Pray. They listen. The Huns turn south. Paris survives. But that's just the beginning. A king gags at the stench from his window and transforms a medieval nightmare into Europe's most fortified capital. A city chooses to starve its own children rather than accept the wrong religion. The guillotine falls on kings, queens, and 20,000 others who thought they were safe. An artist paints a prostitute who stares back at the viewer with cold contempt, and Paris riots. Americans discover the only place in the world where the color of your skin doesn't determine where you can sit. German soldiers march down boulevards specifically designed to prevent revolution, and for 4 years, every Parisian faces one impossible question. What would you do to survive? Here's mine for you. If your neighbor was being hunted and hiding them meant your family dies, what do you choose? Watch until the end, because Paris never gives easy answers. We spent months getting every detail right. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe on Complete Chronicles. It really helps us keep going. 451. Paris is dying. The wagons are loaded. Families pile their possessions onto carts with solid wooden wheels, their eyes fixed on the horizon. Word has spread through the muddy streets of Lutetia. Attila is coming. Attila the Hun, the scourge of God. At Cologne, they say he massacred 11,000 people. Entire cities have been burned to ash. And now his army is heading west, an unstoppable wave of death sweeping across Europe. The people of Paris know what they have to do. Run. Then a young woman pushes through the panicking crowd. Her name is Geneviève, and she does something that makes absolutely no sense. She tells everyone to stop. "Get down on your knees," she shouts over the chaos. "Pray, I know it. I see it. The Huns will not come." Think about that moment. The most feared army in the world is days away. Everyone with sense is fleeing, and this woman is saying, "Stay, pray, trust me." The crowd hesitates. Wagons stop mid-load. Someone drops to their knees. Then another, and another. Within minutes, thousands of Parisians are kneeling in the mud, praying instead of running. It's completely insane. And then Attila's army turns south. They bypass Paris entirely, heading toward Orléans to deal with their Visigoth enemies instead. Whether it was divine intervention, military logistics, or pure blind luck, Geneviève becomes the patron saint of Paris. Her statue still stands on the Pont de la Tournelle today, gazing over the city she supposedly saved with nothing but faith and extraordinary timing. But faith alone wouldn't be enough to protect Paris forever. For the next 7 centuries, the city remained vulnerable. It was a cramped island fortress surrounded by wooden walls, constantly threatened by raiders and rival kingdoms. The Merovingian kings who followed were brutal men with names like Clovis and Clotaire, famous mainly for killing their relatives and building churches to atone for each murder. Paris survived, but barely. It remained small, chaotic, and spectacularly filthy, until a young king opened a window. 1185. Philippe Auguste is 20 years old, standing at his palace window on the Ile de la Cité, admiring the Seine on what should be a beautiful morning. Then a heavy wagon passes below, its wheels churning up the mud in the unpaved street. The smell hits him like a physical blow. Philippe reels backward, gagging. This isn't unusual. Medieval Paris is famous for its stench. The streets are open sewers with names that translate to things like Shit Creek, and Fart Alley. Every rainfall turns them into rivers of enriched mud, churned up by horses, livestock, and the forbidden pigs that everyone keeps despite the ban. The king's own uncle was killed by a pig that frightened his horse, but the law proved impossible to enforce. But Philippe, standing there at his window, hand over his nose, makes a decision that will change everything. He orders every street in Paris to be paved. The work starts slowly, roads adjacent to the palace first, then gradually expanding to main thoroughfares. It takes decades, but Philippe isn't finished. He understands something his ancestors didn't. You can't rule an empire if your capital can be easily conquered. You can't build a great city if it can be burned down by the next army that comes along. So between 1190 and 1210, he builds a wall. Not just any wall, 10 kilometers of fortifications, 3 meters thick, studded with 67 towers. Each tower carefully rounded to deflect projectiles. 24 fortified gates controlling who enters and leaves. Sections of this immense structure still survive today, hidden inside modern buildings in Paris, testimony to how well Philippe's engineers built. The wall expands Paris from a cramped 10 hectares to 250 hectares virtually overnight. Finally, the city has room to grow, room to breathe, room to become something more than a vulnerable island in a river. To guard the western approaches, Philippe builds a massive square fortress crowned with a great tower 45 meters around and 30 meters high. He calls it the Louvre. The walls are so thick the interior is barely 8 meters across, a stronghold and treasury, not a palace. Philippe himself continues living on the cramped Ile de la Cité, still surrounded by the stench he never quite managed to eliminate. But he's given Paris something it desperately needed: security. July 27th, 1214, Sunday morning. Everything Philippe built is about to be tested. On the plains of Bouvines, about 200 kilometers north of Paris, two massive armies face each other in the brutal heat. Philippe Auguste, now 49 years old, commands 25,000 men. Facing him are 80,000 soldiers in a coalition led by King John of England, backed by German and Flemish forces. They've come to crush France once and for all. The battle shouldn't be happening. Fighting on Sunday is forbidden by church law. Nobody cares. The fighting is savage. Knights in heavy armor clash in the suffocating heat, half blinded by sweat cascading inside their helmets, choking on dust kicked up by thousands of horses. At one point, during a cavalry charge, enemy infantry break through the French lines with long hooked weapons. They reach Philippe himself. They knock him off his horse. The King of France goes down. Enemy soldiers hurl themselves on top of him, trying desperately to find a gap in his armor to thrust a dagger through. For a few terrible seconds, the entire history of France hangs in the balance. But Philippe's armor holds. His knights throw themselves protectively over their king, haul him back to his feet, get him on a fresh horse. The French counterattack. Emperor Otto's forces begin to break. Otto himself flees the battlefield, riding 30 kilometers without stopping until he reaches his base at Valenciennes. By 5 o'clock, it's over. The coalition is shattered. The victory sends waves of spontaneous rejoicing throughout France. Bells ring in every village. People dance in the streets. Flowers carpet the roads as captives are led in chains back to Paris. Bishop Guérin leads the procession, singing hymns, with Philippe walking behind. For the first time in its history, Paris can finally build in peace. The great cathedral of Notre Dame, begun decades earlier, can continue its 200-year construction. New hospitals rise. The Latin Quarter expands. Philippe dies 9 years later in 1223, having transformed Paris from a vulnerable island town into Europe's most impressive fortified capital. The city that a saint saved with prayer, that a king saved with paving stones and stone walls, that an army saved on a forbidden Sunday. Medieval Paris took miracles seriously. But sometimes miracles look like hard work, strategic genius, and really good timing. Philippe Auguste gave Paris security. His successors gave it chaos. Then in the early 1500s, something arrived that was even more dangerous than foreign armies, a religious idea that split Europe in half. A German monk named Martin Luther nailed 95 complaints to a church door. He argued that the Catholic Church had become corrupt, that you didn't need priests as intermediaries with God, that anyone could read the Bible themselves and find salvation. It sounds academic. It wasn't. The Reformation exploded across Europe. New Protestant churches formed. In France, Protestants called Huguenots began challenging Catholic authority. It wasn't just theological debate. It was civil war. Neighbors killing neighbors over how to worship God, Catholic against Protestant, brother against brother. And Paris became the most fanatically Catholic city in France. By 1572, France has been bleeding for a decade. Tens of thousands dead in battles and massacres across the country. Everyone is exhausted. Someone has to stop this. Then someone has an idea. A wedding. August 18, 1572. Notre Dame Cathedral. Every bell in Paris ringing for a royal wedding that's supposed to end a war. Henri of Navarre, the leading Protestant prince, is marrying Princess Marguerite. Catholic meets Protestant at the altar. It's brilliant politics. Unite the two sides through marriage. End the religious wars that have been tearing France apart. Protestant nobles from across France travel to Paris for the celebration. Thousands of them. They're relaxed, drinking, celebrating. This is a royal wedding. They're safe here. For 3 days, it works. Then, just after midnight on August 24th, the same bells that rang for the wedding start ringing again. This time, they're a signal. Catholic mobs pour into the streets carrying lists, names and addresses of every Protestant noble in Paris. They break down doors, drag families from their beds. Admiral Coligny, the most important Protestant leader, gets thrown from his window. His head and hands are cut off. His body is paraded through the streets. Henri of Navarre only survives because he's sleeping in the Louvre outside of Paris as the king's new brother-in-law. Catholic soldiers still burst into his room at dawn with swords drawn. The king saves him, then forces him to convert to Catholicism at sword point. Henri agrees. It keeps him alive. For now. 3,000 Parisians die in 3 days. The Seine runs red with blood. One witness writes that Paris looks like a conquered city, but no foreign army did this. Paris did it to itself. The king who saved Henri that morning was Charles IX. 2 years later, Charles is dead. His brother Henri III inherits the throne, but the religious wars continue. Massacres, battles, assassinations. Henri of Navarre eventually escapes Paris, returns to Protestantism, and raises an army. He becomes the leader of Protestant forces in France, fighting battle after battle against Catholic armies. Then in 1589, a fanatical monk stabs King Henri III in his bedchamber. As the king lies dying, he does something extraordinary. He names Henri of Navarre as his legitimate successor. The Protestant who barely survived the wedding massacre 18 years ago is now the rightful king of France. And in May 1590, Henri arrives at Paris with an army to claim his throne. Paris says no. The Catholic League controls the city. Henri's army surrounds the walls, but those medieval fortifications Philippe Auguste built 400 years ago are still doing their job. Henri can't storm them. So he burns every windmill outside the city. No mills means no flour. No flour means no bread. Henri settles in to wait. The city has maybe 6 weeks of food. Then hunger will force them to open the gates. Here's what makes this moment extraordinary. The Catholic League leaders call a meeting. They know what starvation means. They've done the mathematics. They know thousands will die, and they choose it anyway. Better dead than Protestant. 6 weeks become 3 months. The wealthy eat through their private stores first. Then horses disappear. Then donkeys. Dog meat sells at premium prices. Eventually, people are boiling leather for soup and grinding cemetery bones into something resembling flour. The Pope's representative in Paris reports back to the Vatican: no meat, no fish, no milk, no fruit, no vegetables. It feels like there's no sun anymore, no sky, no air, just death. Then the detail that shows how far Paris has fallen. A mother gets caught eating her 2 dead children. City authorities find a child's thigh hidden in her furniture. The children had proper Catholic burials, but hunger doesn't care about burial rites. By August, somewhere between 15 and 30,000 Parisians are dead. Not from violence, from the choice their leaders made, from eating things that slowly kill you, from diseases that ravage bodies with nothing left to fight back. Henri's cannons are close enough now to breach the walls. Catholic League leaders know what's coming. They're preparing for Protestant revenge. Henri offers mercy. No executions, no confiscations, just open the gates. The League still refuses. Then Spanish reinforcements arrive from the Netherlands. They maneuver around Henri, avoid battle, and get supply convoys through to Paris. September 1st, food reaches the city. Paris erupts in celebration. They've survived. They've proven they'd rather eat their children than accept a Protestant king. Tens of thousands dead, but they kept their faith. Henri is still out there though, still Protestant, still the legitimate heir, until July 25th, 1593. Henri walks into the Cathedral of Saint Denis wearing white. No crown, no royal symbols, just a sword that he surrenders at the church steps. He converts to Catholicism. Some claim he said, "Paris is worth a mass," meaning Paris is worth becoming Catholic for. Either way, that's exactly what it meant. Years of war, every battle won. Tens of thousands of his enemies starved, and Paris still refused him, so he changed religions. Pragmatism over principle. White doves are released from the bell tower. Within weeks, Catholic League leaders start defecting to his side. The movement collapses. 9 months later, March 22nd, 1594, Henri enters Paris. No battle, no siege, no revenge massacre. He grants amnesty to nearly everyone who fought against him. The man who starved Paris becomes the king who saves it. But on a spring afternoon in 1610, his carriage gets stuck in traffic on a narrow street called Rue de la Ferronnerie. The attendants jump down to help clear the blocked carts. For just a moment, the king sits alone in his open carriage. François Ravaillac is 32 years old, red hair, failed monk, failed teacher. He's been stalking the king all morning with a stolen kitchen knife. He has been waiting for exactly this moment. But before we watch what happens next, we need to understand what Paris is about to lose. For 16 years, Henri has been transforming his capital. The medieval nightmare is slowly becoming something beautiful. It started within months of his peaceful entry into Paris. He swept aside all objections and began extending the Louvre with a magnificent 500-meter gallery along the Seine, connecting it to the Tuileries Palace. But Henri wasn't just building for kings. He was building for Paris itself. In 1601, France finally had peace. No more religious wars, no more invasions. Henri could focus on his true passion, transforming his capital into something worthy of France. He issued Paris's first planning regulations. No more crooked medieval construction, no more timber buildings ready to burn at the first spark. From now on, everything would be built in an elegant combination of red brick and white stone. The style would become instantly recognizable, defining an entire era of French architecture. Then Henri tackled the bridges. The Pont Neuf had been started back in 1578 but abandoned during the wars. Henri demanded it be finished. Parisians complained about paying for it, so Henri taxed every barrel of wine entering the city. In 1607, the bridge finally opened. The first stone bridge across the Seine with no houses cluttering it, just open space where people could walk, meet, shop, live. One day during construction, Henri came down to inspect the work. He saw an unfinished arch with a gap over the Seine. Before anyone could stop him, the king took a running jump and leaped across. The workers went wild with delight. That was Henri, fearless, accessible, the king who jumped over rivers. The Pont Neuf became the beating heart of Paris. Music played day and night. Street performers entertained crowds. You could buy a parasol, a chicken, or hire a prostitute. The bridge pulsed with the energy of a city finally released from fear and deprivation. But Henri wasn't finished. He created the Place Dauphine, a perfect triangle of matching brick and stone buildings framing a view of the old palace. Named for his infant son, elegant, symmetrical, modern. The first unified plaza in Paris. Within months, it filled with diplomats, lawyers, shops, and restaurants. Then came his masterpiece. In the Marais, on the site where King Henri II had died in that tragic jousting accident, 50 years earlier, Henri built the Place Royale. 36 identical pavilions around a perfect square. Red brick, white stone, mathematical precision. It wouldn't be completed until 2 years after his death, but it remains one of the most beautiful squares in Europe. Henri also tried something no king had attempted before. He planned the Place de France, a massive semicircular plaza in the northeast where 8 straight boulevards would radiate outward, each named for a French province. A symbol of unity, of reconciliation. But you can't rebuild a city without money. And money requires peace. And peace made some people nervous. Since his formal accession in 1593, there had been 24 known plots to assassinate Henri. 24. Catholic extremists hated him for being Protestant too long. Protestant extremists hated him for converting. Spanish agents wanted him dead. The Duke of Savoy sent assassins. Henri survived them all through a combination of luck and his refusal to live in fear. "I'd rather risk death," he reportedly said, "than hide from my people." By 1610, though, Henri's popularity was fading. The building projects cost enormous amounts. His public affairs with dozens of mistresses scandalized even tolerant Parisians. They'd nicknamed him the Vert Galant, the lusty gallant, though at 56 he was neither particularly green nor particularly gallant anymore. Then he fell in love with a 15-year-old girl, Charlotte de Montmorency. Her fiancé fled with her to Brussels. Henri, shockingly, prepared to go to war to get her back. By May 1610, a 50,000-strong French army was poised to invade Flanders. Paris was tense. After a decade of peace, the king seemed ready to throw it all away for a teenage girl. May 14th, 1610, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Henri is traveling from the Louvre to meet his finance minister at the Arsenal. That morning after Mass, he'd been strange, melancholy, talking about death. His friend Marshal Bassompierre tried to cheer him up. "You have the finest kingdom in the world, a beautiful wife, beautiful mistresses, lovely children." "Mon ami," Henri said quietly, "I've got to leave it all." Now his carriage is stuck in the Rue de la Ferronnerie, the same narrow street where carts are always colliding. 3 vehicles tangled together, his attendants dispersing to help. François Ravaillac sees his moment. He leaps onto the running board. The king looks up from his letter. 3 quick stabs. "Ce n'est rien," Henri murmurs. "It's nothing," but the second blow severs his aorta. Blood floods his chest. Within seconds, Henri of Navarre is dead. The man who survived wars, massacres, sieges, and 24 assassination plots is killed by a madman in a traffic jam he'd spent years trying to prevent. When Paris learns the truth the next morning, the city convulses with grief. François Ravaillac insists under torture that he acted alone. God told him to do it. Nobody believes him, but his story never changes. On May 27th, they take him to the Place de Grève. First, burning sulfur, then molten lead and boiling oil, his flesh torn with red-hot pincers. Then they tie his arms and legs to 4 horses. It takes 90 minutes of pulling before he dies. When it's over, the mob storms forward. They hack the body apart, drag pieces through streets. One woman, witnesses report, actually eats some of his flesh. This isn't just revenge, it's terror. Without Henri, will the wars return? Will everything collapse? Henri's funeral procession crosses the Pont Neuf one final time. The bridge he completed, the masterpiece he'd jumped across to make workers laugh. He ruled only 17 years. But in that brief time, he transformed Paris from a medieval fortress into something beautiful, something modern, a capital worthy of France. Henri's 8-year-old son inherits the throne. His widow, Marie de Medici, becomes regent. The Golden Age is over. For 7 years, Marie rules on her son's behalf. She's capable enough. She confirms Henri's Edict of Nantes, calming Protestant fears. She keeps Henri's ministers. Paris doesn't burn. But in 1617, the young king seizes power from his mother in a palace coup. He's only 16, but he's done being controlled. Then, in 1624, Louis appoints Cardinal Richelieu as his chief minister. For the next 18 years, they rule together. They're efficient, they're authoritarian, and they have absolutely no interest in beautifying Paris. Louis dies the following year, in 1643. His son becomes king at 4 years old. Too young to rule, too young to understand that Paris is about to teach him a lesson he'll never forget. 1648. 10-year-old Louis XIV is living in the Palais Royal with his mother Anne and his younger brother. He plays with toy soldiers, marches through the palace deafening people with his drum. He's a normal boy, living in a palace, assuming the world is safe. Then one August night, an angry mob surrounds the palace. The Paris Parlement has been protesting new taxes. Anne, ruling as regent, made a mistake. She arrested 3 of the protest leaders, including an old man named Pierre Broussel, who's beloved by Parisians. The city explodes. 1,200 barricades go up overnight. Chains across streets, barrels piled high, paving stones torn up. The royal family is trapped. The Palais Royal isn't nearly as defensible as the Louvre. That night, demonstrators force Anne and young Louis to take refuge inside. The next morning, the mob is still there, screaming, demanding Broussel's release. Anne gives in. But Paris isn't finished. A month later, on September 13th, the situation gets worse. The royal family flees in the night to the Château de Rueil, the most powerful monarchy in Europe, running from its own capital. For a 10-year-old boy, this is terror, pure humiliation. Your own people chasing you from your home. He never forgives Paris. When Louis finally takes full power as an adult, he understands something his predecessors didn't. You can't control Paris through love. Henri IV tried that and got stabbed in traffic. You control Paris through surveillance. In 1667, Louis appoints Nicolas Gabriel de la Reynie as chief of police, the first person to ever hold this position. La Reynie's job isn't just law enforcement, it's everything: health, sanitation, street lighting, fire safety, total control of urban life. La Reynie installs 6,500 street lamps throughout Paris, candles in lanterns lit at dusk, burning until dawn. Before this, Paris at night was more dangerous than a dark forest. Now it's the most illuminated city in Europe. He bans weapons at night, shuts down the Cour des Miracles, lawless ghettos where police don't dare enter, strengthens fire services, cleans the Seine, issues endless ordinances about dumping waste, polluting water, bearing arms in theaters. Paris becomes a police state, but a clean, well-lit, relatively safe police state. Then, in 1679, La Reynie uncovers something that nearly destroys the monarchy. It starts with poisonings, sudden deaths among the wealthy and powerful, then arrests. A woman named La Voisin gets caught selling love potions, poisons, performing black masses, twisted versions of Catholic ceremonies conducted by corrupt priests to summon demons and cast spells. Under torture, She confesses to incinerating more than 2,500 aborted fetuses. Whether all this actually happened or was extracted through torture, no one can say for certain. But the accusations spread like wildfire. La Reynie establishes a special court, the Chambre Ardente. The investigation spreads like wildfire. 319 people arrested. Names keep surfacing, bigger names, more important names, then the worst name of all, Athénaïs de Montespan, the king's mistress. For 13 years, Montespan has been Louis's favorite. She's given him 8 children. Everyone at court knows her power, and now testimonies allege she attended black masses, that a priest named Guibourg performed satanic rituals on her naked body, that an infant's throat was cut over her belly, blood spilled into a chalice, all to keep the king's love. The evidence keeps mounting. La Voisin's daughter describes it in horrifying detail. In February 1680, they burn La Voisin alive at the Place de Grève. She pushes away the crucifix, swears as the flames rise. Her ashes scatter over Paris. But the investigation can't continue. It's reached the king's own bed. Louis XIV can't let his mistress be tortured and executed like a common witch. In 1682, he shuts down the Chambre Ardente, orders all records burned. The scandal is buried. But Paris knows. Whispers spread. The court reeks of corruption too explosive to handle in the capital. Louis needs to get away, far away. May 6, 1682. Louis officially moves the entire French court to Versailles. The palace has been under construction for years, 36,000 workers, 6,000 horses, transforming a hunting lodge into something unprecedented. Not just a palace, a machine for controlling France. Paris and Versailles become separate worlds, a 6-hour walk apart, far enough that the mob can't reach him, close enough that he can still control the capital through La Reynie's police. For 50 years it works. But here's what Louis doesn't realize. By abandoning Paris, he's creating the city that will eventually destroy his dynasty. Paris without the king becomes Paris with ideas. Paris with philosophy. Paris with rage that has nowhere to direct itself except inward, building pressure year after year. Louis dies in 1715, having ruled for 72 years, the longest reign in European history, the Sun King who turned Paris into a bomb with a very long fuse. 74 years later, that danger explodes. It starts with money, or rather, the lack of it. By 1788, France's finance minister opens the royal books and discovers a catastrophe. 400,000 livres remain in the treasury. Enough for the government to function for an afternoon, maybe less. The Sun King's wars had cost a fortune. His palace had cost a fortune. Decades of extravagance with nobody paying taxes because the clergy were exempt, the nobility were exempt, leaving peasants and workers to carry the entire weight of a dying state. By 1789, bread prices have doubled and Paris is starving. Then in July, the king tries to dismiss his reform-minded finance minister. The city erupts, July 14, 1789. A mob storms the Bastille. Here's what most people get wrong about that day. They free 7 prisoners, 4 forgers, 2 madmen, 1 aristocrat his family wanted locked up. That's it. But symbols don't need truth. They need power. The Bastille represents royal tyranny, so they tear it down stone by stone. King Louis XVI returns from hunting that afternoon. Someone tells him what happened. "Is this a rebellion?" he asks. "No, sire," comes the reply. "It is a revolution." That October, market women march on Versailles. 6,000 of them walk 12 miles through the rain, angry about bread, about prices, about a king living in a palace while Paris starves. They force their way into the palace and surround the royal family. The next day, they escort the king and queen back to Paris. The mob singing, shouting, carrying pikes with the heads of palace guards stuck on top. The royal family returns to the Tuileries as prisoners. Paris has reclaimed its king. For the next 2 years, Louis lives under guard. He watches the revolution abolish noble privileges, confiscate church lands, write a constitution. He smiles, agrees to everything, signs every decree they put in front of him, and quietly plans his escape. June 20th, 1791. Late at night, the royal family flees Paris, Louis disguised as a servant, the Queen as a governess. They almost reach the Austrian border where enemy armies wait to invade and restore the monarchy. But someone recognizes the king's face from coins. At Varennes, a small town just miles from safety, they're stopped, arrested, brought back to Paris in shame. His death warrant is signed that night. Meanwhile, a doctor has proposed something revolutionary. Under the old regime, your execution depends on your class. Nobles get quick beheadings with a sword. Common people hang slowly or get broken on the wheel. It's barbaric and unequal. Dr. Guillotine's solution is elegantly democratic. One machine, one method for everyone, swift, humane, and equal. Democracy through death. The first guillotine goes up in April 1792. It's disappointingly efficient for crowds used to prolonged spectacles. A swish, a thud, and it's over in seconds. They'll get used to it. January 21st, 1793. The Place de la Révolution is ringed with 30,000 troops, cannon positioned at every intersection. The Commune expects riots, rescue attempts, chaos. Louis XVI climbs the scaffold at 10 in the morning. He's 38 years old. He tries to speak, to proclaim his innocence, but the drums drown him out. The blade falls. France has killed its king. Not in battle or rage, but in a legal proceeding with votes counted, debates held, procedures followed. 361 for death, 360 against. One vote deciding his fate. The revolution has invented something new, the democratic execution of sovereignty itself. 9 months later, Marie Antoinette follows him to the scaffold. Her hair has turned white in prison. Her trial is a farce, filled with accusations of incest with her own son, accusations she refuses to dignify with answers. When they lead her to the guillotine, she walks with her head high. Her last words, after accidentally stepping on the executioner's foot, "Pardon me, monsieur." By now, one man controls France. His name is Maximilien Robespierre. He's 35 years old, a lawyer from the provincial town of Arras, impeccably dressed, famously incorruptible, utterly convinced that the revolution requires purification through blood. They call him the Incorruptible because he can't be bribed, can't be swayed, never wavers from his principles. Those principles involve extraordinary amounts of killing. Robespierre leads the Committee of Public Safety, 12 men ruling France as a revolutionary dictatorship. But he's the voice, the ideologist, the one who stands before the convention and explains why mass murder is actually justice. Terror is nothing other than swift, severe, inflexible justice, he announces. And he means it. Under his direction, the law of suspects passes in September 1793. Anyone can be arrested for almost anything: speaking against the revolution, hoarding food, insufficient enthusiasm for Republican virtue, being related to an émigré, being denounced by a jealous neighbor. By December, 7,000 people crowd Paris's 50 prisons, waiting for trials that are barely trials at all. Then, in June 1794, the law of prairial strips away even the pretense of justice. No more defense lawyers, no witnesses for the accused, just the prosecutor reading charges and the guillotine waiting outside. Some days, the blade falls 50 times. The mathematics are staggering. 2,800 dead in Paris, 14,000 in the provinces, 16,594 official death sentences. But those numbers don't count the September massacres, don't count the Vendée Civil War where 250,000 die, don't count starvation in prisons or desperate suicides. The revolution has invented something terrifying. Totalitarian violence made rational, made legal, made democratic. But Robespierre has made too many enemies. Everyone fears they're next on his list. Even members of the convention start wondering when their names will be called. The terror is devouring itself. July 27, 1794, the 9th of Thermidor by the revolutionary calendar. The convention finally turns on Robespierre. They vote to arrest him. He tries to escape to the Hôtel de Ville, tries to rally support, even tries to shoot himself, but only shatters his jaw. The next day, July 28th, Robespierre climbs the scaffold with his jaw wrapped in bloody bandages. The executioner rips off the bandage. Robespierre screams. The blade falls. The architect of the terror dies by his own machinery. The crowd erupts in joy. Within days, the killing slows. Within weeks, prisons start emptying. The terror is over. The revolution promised liberty, equality, fraternity. It delivered industrial-scale death and invented modern totalitarian terror. 20,000 people killed because good men did their duty, because ideology replaced humanity, because virtue became an excuse for murder. Paris survived barely. The scars would last for generations. For 5 years after Robespierre's death, France stumbles through chaos under the corrupt and incompetent Directory. The economy collapses, bread prices spike again, and people are exhausted by revolution, terrified of more violence, desperate for order. Then in 1800, a new century arrives with a new kind of ruler. February 19, 1800. Outside the Tuileries Palace, a 30-year-old general named Napoleon Bonaparte jumps onto his horse to review the troops. Paris watches, electric with excitement mingled with apprehension. This is the man who seized control of France in a bloodless coup 3 months earlier. Until recently, he was a relatively unknown Corsican general, unimpressive in stature, speaking imperfect French with a thick accent. But he's already conquered Italy and Egypt, already become a legend. Napoleon understands something the revolutionaries didn't. People don't want more ideology or promises of liberty. They want stability, bread on their tables, and the reflected glory of military victories. And Paris itself needs to be rebuilt into something magnificent. "I want to be a second Augustus," Napoleon tells his architects. He found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. "I will make Paris stone." Christmas Eve, 1800. Napoleon is on his way to the opera when a massive bomb hidden in a wagon explodes in the Rue Saint-Nicaise. The blast kills 52 bystanders and destroys surrounding buildings, narrowly missing the first consul himself. Napoleon uses the attack as justification for two things. First, a crackdown on dissent that gives his regime the authoritarian powers it hadn't possessed before. Second, a massive rebuilding program that transforms the face of Paris. The damaged medieval buildings around the Louvre have to go anyway, he reasons, so why not clear them all? He demolishes dozens of ancient houses and creates wide, straight new streets named after his victories. Rue de Castillon, Rue de Pyramide, Rue de Rivoli. The old Paris, the cramped medieval warren that bred disease and revolution, will be systematically replaced by something rational, modern, and above all, controlled. December 2nd, 1804. The coronation ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral represents Napoleon's greatest theatrical triumph. For months, workers have labored day and night preparing the cathedral. Notre Dame had been vandalized during the Revolution, its statues decapitated, and treasures looted. Napoleon orders it restored specifically for this ceremony, understanding that ancient symbols of power must be appropriated, not destroyed. Pope Pius VII has been summoned all the way from Rome to perform the coronation. The most powerful religious figure in Europe, traveling to Paris to legitimize this Corsican upstart. But when the crucial moment comes, Napoleon does something shocking. He takes the crown from the Pope's hands and places it on his own head, then crowns his wife Josephine himself. The Pope stands there, reduced to a spectator at his own ceremony. The message is unmistakable. Napoleon doesn't derive power from God or church or ancient bloodlines. He crowns himself through his own will, his own genius, his own conquering armies. It's the ultimate revolutionary act disguised as imperial restoration. Napoleon runs Paris the way he runs his armies, with obsessive attention to detail and absolute control from wherever he happens to be. His ministers in Paris are bombarded daily with letters, orders, and draft decrees. Every decision, no matter how small, flows through Napoleon himself. France becomes more tightly centralized on Paris than it ever was under the Sun King, and Paris is centralized entirely on Napoleon, wherever his tent happens to be pitched across Europe. The building projects multiply with dizzying ambition. In August 1806, he lays the first stone of the Arc de Triomphe at the top of the Champs-Élysées. It's meant to commemorate his greatest victory at Austerlitz and honor the Grande Armée. The foundations have to be dug 8 meters deep to support its immense predicted weight. He'll never see it completed. Work will continue for 30 years after his fall, the arch finally unveiled in 1836 by the last king of France. Paris becomes one vast construction site, dust and scaffolding and the sound of hammers echoing through streets being born. But glory requires constant victories, and constant victories require constant war. Napoleon conquers Italy, Egypt, Austria, and Prussia. He defeats every coalition Europe throws against him. By 1807, after the Peace of Tilsit with Russia, he's effectively master of all Europe. Everything seems possible, his power unlimited, his genius unquestionable. Then in 1812, he invades Russia with 600,000 men. It becomes the catastrophe that destroys everything. The Grande Armée marches to Moscow through the summer. The Russians retreat systematically, burning everything behind them. Moscow itself burns when Napoleon enters it. Winter comes early and brutally. Napoleon orders the retreat, and the cold destroys his army more thoroughly than any battle ever could. Men freeze to death in their ranks. Horses collapse and die. Artillery pieces get abandoned in snowdrifts. Cossacks harass the endless columns of starving, frost-bitten soldiers stumbling westward. Of 600,000 men who marched into Russia, perhaps 10,000 return as effective soldiers. Paris is stunned and terrified. For 20 years, Napoleon has won virtually every battle. The emperor seemed invincible, touched by destiny itself. Now that myth lies shattered in the Russian snow. With remarkable speed, Napoleon raises a new army and fights a brilliant campaign in 1813. But at Leipzig, the Battle of Nations, he suffers his first decisive defeat in the bloodiest encounter Europe has known. The Allies surge toward France's borders, then cross them. Even then, Parisians struggle to believe what's happening. Paris hasn't been entered by a foreign army since the unhappy days of Jeanne d'Arc in the 15th century. Surely the unthinkable can't happen now, not to Napoleon's capital. March 1814. Russian troops enter eastern Paris after fierce fighting. Students from the Polytechnique fight bravely among the tombs of Père Lachaise cemetery, the burial ground Napoleon himself had established just 10 years earlier. But courage isn't enough against overwhelming numbers. The city falls. After 3 days of fighting, Paris surrenders to the Allied forces. For the first time since the 15th century, a foreign army occupies the French capital. On April 6th, Napoleon abdicates. They exile him to Elba, a tiny island off the Italian coast. He escapes the following year, returns for the 100 Days, raises another army, and fights one last campaign. At Waterloo on June 18, 1815, he suffers his final defeat. This time they exile him to St. Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic, where he'll die 6 years later, slowly, probably of stomach cancer, dictating his version of history. Napoleon ruled France for 15 years. In that time, he did more for Paris than any king in 4 centuries. But so many of his grand projects remained unfinished when he fell. The Arc de Triomphe wouldn't be completed until 1836. Many of his planned boulevards existed only on paper. His successors would finish what he began. Haussmann would complete his vision of a rationalized, modernized Paris 50 years later, creating the city we recognize today. But Napoleon's greatest monument wasn't architectural at all. It was administrative. The centralized state he built, the bureaucracy he perfected, the legal codes he wrote, the systems he established for everything from tax collection to education. All of it survived him. Much of it remains in place today, more than 200 years later, still shaping how France governs itself. The emperor who rebuilt everything left behind an empire of paper and procedure that proved far more durable than monuments of stone. The emperor who rebuilt everything left behind an empire of paper and procedure that proved far more durable than monuments of stone. But his nephew would finish what Napoleon began, and accidentally create the conditions for Paris's bloodiest civil war. 1851. Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, the great emperor's nephew, seizes power in a coup and declares himself Napoleon III. He's been dreaming about this moment for years, including the years he spent in prison after an earlier failed attempt. "I want to be a second Augustus," he announces. "I will make Paris stone." Unlike his uncle, who spent his reign conquering Europe, Napoleon III focuses on Paris itself. He understands something crucial. Those narrow, twisting medieval streets have sheltered every revolution since 1789. Every uprising uses those cramped alleys to build barricades and hide from troops. His solution is simple: tear it all down. In 1853, he appoints Georges Eugène Haussmann as prefect of the Seine, giving him dictatorial powers over the city. Haussmann is 40 years old, a German Alsatian with ruthless efficiency and a genius for destruction. Years later, when asked to describe himself, Haussmann doesn't hesitate. "I was chosen first and foremost as a demolition artist." The numbers are staggering. 20,000 houses demolished, 40,000 new ones built. Entire medieval neighborhoods that survived Henri IV, Louis XIV, and the Revolution now vanish. "We ripped open the belly of old Paris," Haussmann writes later, "the neighborhood of revolt and barricades. We cut through the almost impenetrable maze of alleys, piece by piece." Great boulevards slice through the city, long and wide and straight as gunfire. The Boulevard de Sebastopol, the Rue Lafayette, running 5 kilometers without a single curve. The Boulevard Voltaire, specifically designed for speedy passage of troops. Because here's the secret: those gorgeous boulevards aren't just about beauty or traffic. They're weapons, perfect fields of fire for artillery, wide enough that no barricade can block them, straight enough for cavalry charges. Paris is being redesigned as a battlefield, dressed up as art. 32,000 gas lamps transform the city into La Ville Lumière, the city of light. At night, the new boulevards glow like something from a dream. Glass and iron structures rise everywhere. Les Halles Market becomes a cathedral of modern materials. Paris becomes one immense construction site of dust, rubble, and constant demolition. But there's a problem nobody anticipated. As the new boulevards rise and the city becomes beautiful, rents explode. The working class can't afford central Paris anymore. They're pushed eastward to slum neighborhoods like Belleville and Ménilmontant. Despite all the modernization, these districts still lack proper sewers. Typhoid kills over 1,000 people in 1865. The poor are more concentrated, more organized, and angrier than ever before. Haussmann didn't destroy the revolutionary neighborhoods. He just created new and much more dangerous ones. 1870. Napoleon III declares war on Prussia. It goes worse than anyone imagined. Within weeks, the French army is crushed. On September 1st, Napoleon himself surrenders. The Second Empire collapses. Prussian forces march on Paris. The siege lasts 4 months. Parisians eat through their livestock, then their horses, then their cats and dogs. The zoos are emptied. The beloved elephants from the Jardin des Plantes end up as steaks. People boil leather scraps and starve slowly while Prussian cannon lob occasional shells as reminders. By January 1871, Paris surrenders. Prussian troops march down the Champs-Élysées. The shame is unbearable. March 18, 1871, government troops try to seize cannons from Montmartre. The crowd refuses. 2 generals get lynched. Troops refuse to fire on civilians. The government panics and flees to Versailles. The Paris Commune is born. For 2 months, the city runs itself. They pass laws helping the poor, cancel back rent, establish minimum wages. They also arrest the archbishop and topple the Vendôme column, Napoleon I's monument to military glory, letting it crash into the street. The government in Versailles watches with horror. May 21, 1871, Sunday evening. The Commune holds a concert in the Tuileries Palace with 1,500 musicians. It's a beautiful spring day. People are celebrating. Outside the walls, government troops are waiting. They enter that night through an undefended gate. What follows becomes Bloody Week, 7 days of mass execution and urban warfare. The irony is brutal. Haussmann designed those wide boulevards to prevent revolutionary warfare. Now they become perfect killing grounds as government troops advance with overwhelming firepower. The communards retreat eastward, fighting street by street. And as they retreat, they burn Paris. The Tuileries Palace goes up in flames. The Hôtel de Ville burns. The Ministry of Finance. Long stretches of the Rue de Rivoli. If they can't have Paris, no one will. By May 27th, the last defenders make their stand at Père Lachaise Cemetery. The next morning, 147 captured communards are marched to the cemetery wall and shot. The killing doesn't stop. For days, troops execute anyone suspected of communard sympathy. Bodies dumped in parks. Blood flowing into the Seine. Between 20,000 and 25,000 Parisians die during Bloody Week. More than died during the entire terror of 1793. By June, the Tuileries is a scorched ruin. The Hôtel de Ville is a blackened shell. Special guidebooks are published for tourists wanting to view the wreckage. Postcards show the twisted metal, the headless statues, the palace clock stopped at 10 minutes to 9. Within a few years, most damage is repaired. Only the Tuileries is left as a reminder. And on Montmartre, exactly where those 2 generals were lynched, construction begins on a new church, the Basilica of Sacré-Cœur, officially described as a witness of repentance and a symbol of hope. But to many Parisians, especially in the working-class neighborhoods, it looks less like reconciliation and more like occupation. A white fortress reminding the poor who won. Haussmann built the world's most beautiful city as a weapon against its own citizens. And for one terrible week in May 1871, that weapon worked exactly as designed. But 8 years before the Commune burned Paris, another kind of violence happened. The kind that doesn't spill blood, but changes everything anyway. May 15, 1863. The Salon opens at the Palais de l'Industrie. This is where careers are made or destroyed. The jury has rejected thousands of paintings this year. The accepted works hang floor to ceiling in gilded frames. And everyone is crowding around one painting in particular, not to admire it, to mock it. 7,000 people pack the gallery, pointing, laughing, shouting insults at a canvas called Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe, luncheon on the grass. It shows 3 people having a picnic, 2 men fully clothed in modern suits, one woman completely naked, staring directly out at the viewer with absolute composure. "Hideous!" someone shouts. "Obscene!" screams another. The guards have to form a barrier to prevent physical attacks on the canvas. The painter is Edouard Manet. He's 31 years old, and he's just committed artistic blasphemy. Here's what makes the painting so shocking. Not the nudity, the salon is full of naked women. But those women are goddesses, nymphs, Venus rising from waves, distant, mythological, safe. Manet painted modern Parisians. That's his brother and a sculptor friend. The naked woman is Victorine Meuron, a professional model. They're having a picnic in the Bois de Boulogne, and nobody's pretending this is ancient Greece. The scandal isn't sex, it's reality. The poet Charles Baudelaire watches the mob and understands what Manet has done. He's been writing for years about modernity as artistic value. Paint what you see. Paint your own time. Stop pretending you live in ancient Rome. Manet just showed everyone what that looks like, and Paris hates it. Meanwhile, another painter is making a fortune doing exactly the opposite. Jean-Louis Ernest Meissonier paints historical scenes with microscopic precision. His masterpiece, 1807 Friedland, shows Napoleon on horseback surrounded by his army. Every button on every uniform correct, every whisker on every horse's muzzle individually rendered. His paintings are tiny, some smaller than a sheet of paper, but they sell for fortunes. He spends months perfecting a single corpse in the snow for the Campaign of France. Critics call him a genius. The public adores him. He becomes the richest painter in France. Manet paints with visible brushstrokes, quick, rough, honest. The battle lines are drawn, meticulous lies versus rough truth. The rejected artists are so furious about the Salon jury that Napoleon III himself gets involved. The emperor visits the rejected paintings, studies them, and makes an unprecedented announcement. There will be a second exhibition, the Salon des Refusés, the exhibition of the rejected. It's meant to humiliate them. Let the public see what real art isn't. But Napoleon accidentally does something revolutionary. He legitimizes the avant-garde. He makes rejection a badge of honor. 2 years later, Manet exhibits something even more dangerous. Olympia. A naked woman reclines on white sheets. A black servant brings flowers from a client, an orchid in her hair, a bracelet on her wrist. She's clearly a prostitute, and she's looking at you, not seductively, not shyly, with cold assessment, as if to say, "You're the customer, and you disgust me." The reaction is instant rage. Crowds shove each other to get close enough to mock it. Critics call her a female gorilla. Guards have to protect the painting from physical assault. The salon moves it higher on the wall where it's harder to reach. One critic writes that Manet has painted the personification of vice. Then another critic writes, art sunk so low deserves no comment. But the novelist Émile Zola sees something else. He writes a furious defense. They wanted a Venus, and you gave them a girl. What you should have done was make the body less earthy and perfume it with some poetic scent. Exactly, Manet refused to perfume reality. By 1874, a younger generation of painters has been watching Manet for a decade. They gather at cafes, arguing about vision and truth. Most of them are starving. Claude Monet sometimes pawns his paintings just to buy food. Pierre-Auguste Renoir paints his friends because he can't afford professional models. Camille Pissarro, already in his 40s with a growing family, watches his children go hungry while the salon keeps rejecting him. Edgar Degas comes from money, which makes him insufferable during the arguments, but at least he can buy drinks. They're desperate, broke, and furious, but they keep painting what they see, not what the Académie says they should see. They're tired of salon rejections, so they organize their own exhibition in the photographer Nadar's studio on the Boulevard des Capucines. 30 artists, 165 works, no jury, no prizes. Monet exhibits a painting of Le Havre harbor at sunrise. It's barely finished, orange mist, blue water, a few quick strokes suggesting boats. He can't call it a realistic view, so he titles it Impression Sunrise. A critic named Louis Leroy writes a devastating satirical review. He calls them all impressionists. meaning they're too incompetent to finish paintings properly, can only manage vague impressions. The insult becomes their name, the badge of honor Napoleon III accidentally created. The press crowns Manet king of the Impressionists. There's only one problem. Manet refuses to join them. He keeps submitting to the Salon, keeps seeking official acceptance, never exhibits with the group that considers him their leader. He wants to change the system from inside, not abandon it, until the day he dies. May 1st, 1883. Manet dies at 51 from complications of syphilis. He never received the Legion of Honor he craved, never got the Salon prizes, never achieved the official recognition he spent his life pursuing. Olympia still hangs in his studio, unsold. 24 years later, in 1907, the painting finally enters the Louvre. The prostitute who stared back becomes a national treasure. The female gorilla transforms into the birth of modern art. But Manet never saw it, died believing he'd failed. Decades later, Pablo Picasso, arguably the most famous artist of the 20th century, becomes obsessed with Manet's scandalous picnic painting. He creates over 200 versions of Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe. Drawings, paintings, prints, endless variations. He writes, "When I see the Déjeuner sur l'herbe, I can see intelligence in each brushstroke." That's what the crowd of 7,000 people mocking the painting couldn't see. They thought Manet couldn't paint properly, didn't know the rules. He knew the rules perfectly. He was breaking them on purpose, with intelligence, with courage. The mockers saw failure. Picasso saw genius. Meissonier's tiny, perfect historical scenes sell for fortunes in his lifetime. Today they hang in museum storage. Technical marvels nobody cares about. Every button correct. Every whisker perfect. Every truth missing. Manet's rough, honest prostitute stares from museum walls worldwide, still assessing, still judging, still asking, "Are you brave enough to see what's actually there?" Paris chose Meissonier, paid him fortunes, celebrated his lies. History chose Manet, remembered his truth. While painters argued about vision in galleries, Paris itself was transforming into something unprecedented. Electric lights replaced gas lamps. The metro opened and tunneled beneath Haussmann's boulevards, and the Eiffel Tower, built for the 1889 World's Fair and supposed to be temporary, became permanent, dominating the skyline like an iron promise of modernity. And something else was happening, something Paris was doing deliberately. The city was becoming the anti-America. 1903. A young American woman named Gertrude Stein arrives in Paris to join her brother Leo, escaping a life in California where, as a wealthy Jewish woman, certain doors stayed permanently closed, certain clubs wouldn't have her, and certain neighborhoods made it clear she wasn't welcome. In Paris, nobody cares. They rent an apartment at 27 Rue de Fleurus and start buying paintings from unknown artists who can't afford to eat. A strange Spanish kid named Picasso, struggling impressionists like Monet. Within a decade, their walls are covered with what will become the most valuable private art collection in the world. But that's not why Gertrude stays. She stays because Paris lets her be exactly who she is. Heavy-set, dressed unfemininely, living openly with her experimental writing style that American publishers reject. 4 years later, in 1907, a woman named Alice B. Toklas arrives in Paris and meets Gertrude at a salon. They become inseparable. Gertrude and Alice build a life together that would be impossible in America. Hosting Saturday night gatherings where every important artist and writer in Paris comes through their door, while Gertrude sits like a Buddha, pronouncing judgments, deciding who's a genius and who's a fraud. Paris doesn't just tolerate them. Paris celebrates them. The Belle Époque, the beautiful era, is in full swing. That's what they'll call this period later, looking back with nostalgia at the years from roughly 1890 until 1914, when Paris becomes the capital of everything modern: art, fashion, entertainment, philosophy, and above all, freedom. The Moulin Rouge opens in Montmartre, where can-can dancers kick their legs while Toulouse-Lautrec paints posters that turn advertising into art. Cafes stay open all night, absinthe flows freely, and the city pulses with a kind of liberated hedonism that shocks and attracts in equal measure. Americans arrive in increasing numbers, not as tourists, but as exiles. White Americans fleeing prohibition and Puritanism. Black Americans fleeing racism and violence. 1899. A composer named Scott Joplin publishes Maple Leaf Rag in Missouri, and ragtime music explodes across America. African American music, syncopated and joyful and completely new. White America loves the music but hates the musicians. Jim Crow laws are at their peak. Segregation is the law of the land, lynchings are common, and a black musician in America, no matter how talented, performs for white audiences who see him as entertainment, not quite human. Then these musicians hear about Paris, where skin color supposedly doesn't determine where you can live, where you can eat, or who you can love. French audiences listen to jazz music like it's serious art rather than exotic entertainment. And a black man can walk into any cafe, sit at any table, and nobody moves away. It sounds impossible, too good to be true, so they come to find out. The first wave arrives before the war, but then World War I changes everything. When America enters the war in 1917, they send nearly 2 million soldiers, with hundreds of thousands being black troops, including entire military bands and entertainment units. These soldiers see Paris for the first time and experience something they've never felt in America: respect. French civilians treat them as liberators, as heroes, as men. French women dance with them, date them, marry them without scandal. There are no separate water fountains, no signs saying colored and white, no one crossing the street to avoid them. When the war ends in 1918, many simply don't go home. 1920 brings two transformations that make the contrast even sharper. America passes the 18th Amendment, making the sale of alcohol illegal across the entire country, while in Paris, champagne flows like water. That same year, women get the right to vote in America. Progress, supposedly. But divorce is still scandalous. Birth control is illegal in most states. And a woman who drinks, smokes, or has sex before marriage ruins her reputation forever. Short skirts and short hair mark you as loose, dangerous, probably insane. In Paris, women smoke in cafes, cut their hair into bobs, wear trousers if they want, live with men they're not married to, have affairs, get abortions, write novels, paint, sculpt, and nobody calls them insane. The contrast is deliberate. Paris is selling itself as the place where you can be whoever you want. And Americans suffocating under morality laws and social restrictions can't resist. December 1921. A young writer named Ernest Hemingway arrives in Paris barely 22 years old, working as a foreign correspondent and barely making enough to eat. His wife Hadley has a small trust fund, enough to survive in Paris, nowhere near enough in America. He starts hanging out at Gertrude Stein's apartment, where she takes one look at his writing and tells him to strip it down, make every word count, eliminate all decoration. He listens and starts writing the way he'll become famous for: clean, spare, honest sentences that hit like punches. But Hemingway isn't alone. Over the next few years, more Americans arrive. F. Scott Fitzgerald comes in 1924, already famous for This Side of Paradise, running from his wife Zelda's mental illness and his own alcoholism. Ezra Pound arrives, then James Joyce working on Ulysses, a book so explicit it can't be published in America or Britain. E. Cummings comes, Cole Porter writes songs, and they all gather at the same cafes: Le Dôme, La Rotonde, La Closerie des Lilas, drinking, arguing, writing, creating. Gertrude Stein coins the term for them: you are all a lost generation. Lost because the war destroyed their faith in the values they grew up with. Lost because they can't go home. Lost because America seems small and provincial and suffocating after Paris. But they're not really lost. They're free for the first time in their lives. October 1925. The Théâtre des Champs-Élysées is packed for a new revue called La Revue Nègre. The audience elegant and sophisticated and ready to be scandalized in that delicious Parisian way. Then Josephine Baker appears. She's 19 years old, born in St. Louis to a mother who worked as a domestic servant, started performing at 15, and now she's dancing across the Paris stage wearing almost nothing but feathers, moving in ways that make the audience gasp. Her performance called the Danse Sauvage. Paris goes insane for her. Within months, she's the most famous entertainer in the city. The following year, 1926, she opens at the Folies Bergère in a new show called La Folie du Jour. And that's when she debuts the costume that will make her immortal. A skirt made of 16 artificial bananas, a pearl necklace, and almost nothing else. She descends from a fake palm tree and dances, and Paris loses its collective mind. She gets paid fortunes, moves into a mansion, adopts a pet cheetah named Chiquita that she walks on a leash down the Champs-Élysées wearing a diamond collar. But here's what matters. She's not just exotic entertainment to Paris. She becomes a French cultural icon, the symbol of modern Paris, the Jazz Age personified. Ernest Hemingway watches her perform and writes that she was the most sensational woman anybody ever saw. Think about what that means. A black woman from Missouri becoming the symbol of Parisian sophistication. In America, she couldn't eat at most restaurants. In Paris, she's royalty. That's not accident. That's Paris deliberately positioning itself as America's opposite. But there's a shadow growing across this paradise. By the mid-1930s, refugees start arriving from Germany, Jewish intellectuals fleeing Hitler, artists whose work the Nazis call degenerate, coming to Paris seeking the same freedom Americans found decades earlier. Paris absorbs them, but the atmosphere is changing. Conversations in cafes turn political. Some Americans start leaving. The refugees bring stories that are hard to believe, stories about what's happening across the Rhine. For now, for these few golden decades between the wars, Paris remains what it advertised itself as, the place where you could be whoever you wanted. And for Americans suffocating under prohibition and segregation and sexual repression, that freedom was more precious than all the champagne and café crèmes in the world. But everyone can feel it. The jazz still plays. The wine still flows. Artists still argue about the future. They just don't realize how little future is left. German troops march into Paris at dawn. No battle, no resistance. The government fled days ago to Bordeaux. The military declared Paris an open city to avoid destruction. So the Wehrmacht simply walks in, their boots echoing through empty boulevards. Empty because 2.5 million Parisians have already fled. The population that remained, 700,000 people, wakes up to swastika flags hanging from the Eiffel Tower, from the Arc de Triomphe, from every major monument that defines the city. German officers set up headquarters at the Hôtel Crillon. They requisition the best apartments, the finest restaurants, the most prestigious theaters. And then they wait to see what Parisians will do. Here's the choice that nobody should have to make. Collaborate to survive or resist and probably die. Most people choose survival, not because they're cowards, but because they have children to feed, elderly parents to protect, jobs they can't afford to lose. They learn to live with the occupiers, shop at stores now serving Germans, work in offices now under Nazi control, navigate a city transformed into something unrecognizable. Some collaboration is more visible, more controversial. Coco Chanel, the fashion designer who built an empire on elegance, begins an affair with a Nazi officer named Hans Günther von Dinklage. She lives at the Ritz Hotel, now German headquarters, throughout the occupation. After the war, she'll claim it was for business survival, to protect her company and her workers. Others will call it collaboration. The truth, like everything about occupation, is probably more complicated than either label allows. Because here's what makes the occupation so morally devastating. The line between survival and collaboration isn't clear. Is it collaboration to serve Germans at your restaurant? To print newspapers under censorship? To continue living your life while others are being hunted? The resistance becomes a mythology almost immediately. After liberation, it seems like everyone was secretly resisting. Everyone claims to have been part of the underground. Everyone has a story about sabotage or hidden refugees or messages smuggled past checkpoints. The reality is far more modest and far more dangerous. Real resistance is small acts of sabotage by railway workers. Metro conductors smuggling messages in their jacket pockets, deliberately changing route signs to confuse German troops. Teachers hiding Jewish children in their classrooms. Shopkeepers providing food to people with no ration cards. And most of these resistors die. At Mont Valérien, a fortress on Paris's western edge, the Germans execute over 1,000 prisoners during the occupation. Resistance fighters, hostages, people caught with forbidden weapons. Some are teenagers. They're shot at dawn, their bodies dumped in mass graves. A plaque there today reads, "They died so France could live." But thousands more Parisians did nothing heroic. They simply tried to survive 4 years of occupation without starving, without getting shot, without losing whatever small safety they'd managed to preserve. And here's the ugliest truth. Some Parisians actively helped the Nazis. July 16, 1942. Before dawn, French police, not Germans, French police, begin knocking on doors throughout Paris. They're arresting Jews. Over the next 2 days, 13,000 people seized, including 4,000 children. The victims are taken to the Vélodrome d'Hiver, an indoor cycling stadium, packed together with no food, no water, minimal sanitation. After several days in these conditions, they're transported to Drancy, then to Auschwitz. Almost none survive. The Germans ordered this roundup, but French authorities organized it. French police carried it out. French bureaucrats provided the lists of names and addresses, systematic files tracking every Jew in Paris by nationality, profession, and street. Some Parisians informed on their Jewish neighbors for money, for their apartments, for settling personal scores. But most victims were found through bureaucratic efficiency, card files, census records, police registries. The occupation revealed something terrible, how ordinary people could become complicit in atrocity through both active cruelty and passive administrative precision. August 25, 1944. Paris is free. Charles de Gaulle marches down the Champs-Élysées, surrounded by jubilant crowds. People weep, sing, embrace strangers. The nightmare is over. But liberation brings its own violence. Women who slept with German soldiers, or were rumored to have slept with them, are dragged into the streets. Their heads are shaved publicly while crowds cheer and spit. Some are stripped naked, paraded through neighborhoods as warnings. It's mob justice, brutal and indiscriminate. Some of these women were prostitutes who had no choice about their clients. Some had genuine love affairs. Some were falsely accused by enemies settling scores. None of them get trials. None of them get mercy. After 4 years of powerlessness, Paris takes revenge on the easiest targets: women. In a cafe on the left bank, 2 intellectuals are trying to make sense of what the occupation revealed about human nature. Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus meet regularly at the Café de Flore, smoking endless cigarettes and wrestling with impossible questions. How do you live morally when all choices are compromised? How do you judge people for collaborating when you don't know what threats they faced? How do you maintain integrity when simply staying alive requires constant moral compromise? From these conversations, existentialism emerges, a philosophy born from occupation's moral chaos. The idea that you're defined not by grand gestures, but by daily choices under impossible circumstances. That freedom means accepting full responsibility for your decisions, even when all options are terrible. Sartre will later write something that outrages everyone. We were never more free than under German occupation. He means that when all external structures collapse, when you can't hide behind convention or authority, you're forced to choose who you are every day, every action. It's a controversial claim, offensive to many who suffered, but it captures something true about the occupation. It stripped away all pretense and forced everyone to confront exactly what they were willing to do to survive. 24 years later, Paris tears itself apart again. May 1968. Students at the Sorbonne protest university conditions. Police respond with violence. The Latin Quarter becomes a battlefield. Students rip up Haussmann's paving stones, the ones laid a century earlier to prevent exactly this kind of uprising, and throw them at riot police. Someone spray paints a slogan that becomes the revolution's motto, "Sous les pavés, la plage," under the paving stones, the beach. It means, beneath the order and control and bureaucracy, liberation is possible. You just have to tear up what's been imposed. For 3 weeks, France teeters on the edge of collapse. 10 million workers go on strike. De Gaulle flees Paris in secret, flies to a military base in Germany to secure the army's loyalty, then returns with tanks positioned around the city. The revolution ends. Universities get reformed. The Sorbonne splits into 13 smaller institutions. Workers win a 35% raise in minimum wage and better conditions. Women gain more freedom from traditional expectations. Authority becomes something to question rather than automatically obey. But de Gaulle's party wins the next election with their largest majority ever. The students who threw paving stones become lawyers and professors. The system absorbs the rebellion, grants just enough concessions to survive, and continues. France gets social reforms without revolution, which is exactly what the establishment wanted all along. 10 chapters, 2,000 years. One question: what do you do when you have to choose? Saint Geneviève chose faith over safety. The revolutionaries chose liberty over stability. Parisians in 1940 chose survival, heroism, or collaboration. Most chose something murky in between. Paris endures not because it's beautiful, but because it refuses to be settled, refuses to pretend any answer is final. The students of '68 ripped up Haussmann's paving stones, looking for the beach underneath. The jazz still plays. The arguments continue. And there might be something we haven't imagined yet. If this journey meant something to you, please like, share, and subscribe to Complete Chronicles. We spent months making sure every detail was right, because history deserves to be told truthfully. Thank you for walking through 2,000 years of Paris with us.